Starting very young humbles you because you're going to fail. You're going to hit some roadblocks. It's just a matter of paddling through, having tunnel vision, looking at the end result.
Well, today's an episode I've been looking to for a long time. So, Mauricio Castro, welcome.
Hey, Brad, thank you so much for having me, man.
Excited to have you on. So, Mauricio is the owner, CEO of Summit Stone. Anyone that's followed our social media, Mauricio has been our go-to. I mean, everything. I think every single project we've done in our pretty much since you and I met, I don't know, how long ago was that? 8, 9 years ago?
Yeah, I was going to say
Nice.
we're nearing 10 years, man.
Yeah, I'm like, I think we're almost at 10 years, and Mauricio's done every single project, and it seems everyone gets more intricate, and Mauricio's like, I got it every time, and he delivers every time. So, mhm.
It's funny. We just finished one of your jobs in Fountain Hills, and we met with the homeowner. And it's very intricate. The designer really knocked it out of the park. A lot of custom countertops and stone cladding, LEDs. And the homeowner was present, and she said, "How do you do it, man? It seems like you're so calm, but we're talking about slabs that are very expensive. We're talking about timelines that you need to meet." And I just smiled, chuckled, and said, I'm freaking out on the inside, but I want to deliver, and we delivered. It was a great build.
I think we maybe touched there, Mauricio, because I think that's something unique about you. In my experience, you've always been calm, and these projects are not easy, and you're dealing with very complicated materials, and from which I'm sure you can speak about the difference, maybe some advice for designers, architects, builders to listen between porcelain slabs, between engineered stone, between real stone, marble. Maybe we'll go down that direction in a second, but maybe speak to the calmness, because I think at a young age for you, you're very calm, you're very professional, you're very well spoken. Um, I think one of the hardest things we do is like do an interface with the client. And sometimes your
Mhm.
clients meet as a GC, and GCs can be a-holes sometimes, like, Mauricio, why aren't you here? Why is this template? When are you hitting the
Yeah.
schedule? And so you're trying to balance a lot of personalities, a lot of, deadlines, timelines. What do you feel has been best training for you? How did you get up to speed to be able to handle yourself like that in front of a client and be like, no, I may be panicked on the inside like a duck on the water, but underneath that water, I'm paddling like crazy.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it has to do with that. I started very young, and starting very young humbles you because you're going to fail, and it's part of it. You're going to hit some roadblocks, and starting so young has helped me develop the owner CEO that I am today.
Hmm.
And like you're saying, it's just a matter of paddling through and looking at the having tunnel vision, looking at the end result. And I absolutely love working with AFT. I've said it many times. You guys, you have such a great workforce. I can call your superintendents, I can call your coordinators, and they're there. And that has a lot to do with it too. Being calm and having your guys' back. You're saying GCs can be a-holes, but the thing is, I don't associate myself with those type of GCs. I'm very particular about the GCs that I work for, and obviously, you're one of them.
And I do appreciate the compliment, but what's interesting, Mauricio, is to be selective, though, there's credibility behind that. I think a lot of people listening may not realize that, yeah, you may be able to sit here and say, there's certain people I want to work with, but that doesn't happen by chance, right? I mean, that happens because you have an operation in a system, and it puts you on a pedestal that you can be demanded by some of these higher end GCs that probably treat you a little bit different than other ones. I'm sure it wasn't that way at day one. You
Mhm.
know, as you look at your craft, where did you focus on your craft, on your communication, maybe on not even pricing per se, but just on your operation to be able to get to a point where you can be a little bit more selective with who you want to work with?
Yeah, starting out, I was knocking on doors. I went
Really?
door on. Yes, I shout out to Thumbtack. I don't know if you're familiar with
I'm
Thumbtack.
not.
That
Actually, I'm not at all.
Thumbtack is a great app for anyone that's wanting to start a business or a trade, and it's very much like Angie's List or the other type of lead type based softwares. And that's where I met Brandon Holtzman, actually, and Brandon
Hmm.
obviously introduced me to you.
Right.
And I was working directly with homeowners, and as you know, that can be very stressful.
Yeah.
And as a trade, my goal was to eventually get to the point where I'm at now, which is just dealing directly with builders, with contractors, so I don't have to go knocking on doors. Um, Partnering up with contractors like yourself, has put me in a spotlight and exposure where, like you said, I can be selective. I have builders calling me, almost not every day, I would say, but at least twice or three times a week, wanting to partner up and say, hey, we've got this project going on. Do you want to take it on? And my first question is, okay, what's your timeline? When do you want to start? And a red flag for me is, oh, we're ready for template. So they're putting me in a position where I can't do it right now because my pipeline is so backed up. And like I said, it's a red flag right away, saying, why do you need a fabricator this this desperately so far into your build? So again, going back to good contractors that I want to work for, having all of their ducks in a row and coming in as a countertop guy, you're towards the end of the build, right? So you've got the contractor and the homeowner already being wanting to have their project finished. And so there can be a lot of frustration because either the project has been delayed, um, and as a countertop guy, you just want to have the patience, and you also want to tell them, hey, we want to deliver, we want to have the best experience possible, but it's going to take some time because at the end of the day, we are manufacturers and we are working with expensive stone. We have to vein match everything. We have to make it perfect for you.
It's interesting, and I do want to talk about some of the precision you've had when you talk about lining up veins and stuff, and maybe the technology you're using. But what's interesting about Thumbtack, I was looking that up, as you were kind of sharing your story here, and I see where it, like you mentioned, Angie's List, where it's kind of connecting you with people. So were you physically knocking doors, or metaphorically just saying, I'm on Thumbtack, I'm just trying to get any job I can get?
Metaphorically, I mean, I
Yeah.
wasn't really knocking on doors, but it really felt like it,
Yeah.
because as when you're starting out, you want to have a lot of jobs. I remember being so nervous and being so panicked when I had a backlog of 8 projects, and half of those were just vanities.
Yeah.
As a countertop guy, you rely on cabinets being installed, and being ready to go, and some of them were doing tear outs and doing installs and walking with the homeowner, kind of grabbing them by the hand and going to showrooms to select slabs. But again, that was back in the day, and now we are so blessed to be where we're at now, working with builders and having a huge backlog, and being, like you said, being a contractor, being a subcontractor like a countertop fabricator is demanding. And
Mhm.
so being in a position where you are wanted is such a blessing.
How do you handle that when it's out of square cabinetry, when fill conditions aren't ideal? Maybe it's the drywall, maybe it's the framing. Some of these are very tight. You're trying to scribe in there.
Oh yeah,
How do you work with the builder through some of these conditions that may not be ideal for your product and install?
it's hard. It's hard. I mean, you know this. It's really hard to get a perfect straight wall, right? It doesn't matter what builder it is. There's always going to be inconsistencies. But we work a lot with your superintendents and with designers, and we look at the scope of work. Let's say countertop has cabinets that are sitting on top of them, so there is some leeway there to leave a little gap here and there. But we try to be as perfect as possible. We don't rely on tile guys covering our mistakes or anything like that. We try to leave everything as perfect as possible, because at the end of the day, these customers are paying a lot for their slabs. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's in some instances, and we want to deliver. We want them to be happy with the surface that they're going to be using every day. And it's part of teaching your customers also, like, hey, we've got marble countertops here that are going to etch and stain. We've got these types of countertops that are bulletproof, but they're going to cost more money. So again, it's the designers in our field are very experienced, but some of them aren't. So you have to kind of teach them and be there with them and kind of guide them um, as far as picking up materials and stuff like that.
Mauricio, as you're sharing this, I'm just fascinated still that you're 20 years old and you're like, I'm going to go start on my own now. You're in your 30s, like super young. And, just to pivot a little bit, I've been fortunate to speak on occasion at, the National Builder Show and some of these other venues. And I speak about how the trades are changing. I'm like, when I look at my best countertop guy, which is you, Mauricio, I speak about you personally. I'm like, Mauricio's so young and he's really leveraged social media. You mentioned you've had some videos go viral. There's a lot of content that we've collaborated on. They've done really well. But before we get to that, what, I think it's pretty rare to find someone that's that young that's willing to go out there, because the challenge in construction, and I can relate, even though I have a totally different role than you. When I came out of college, I didn't have gray hair. I'm some young punk kid and people don't want to listen to me. This 56-year-old concrete guy that's been doing this for 40 years
Yeah,
doesn't want to hear anything I want to tell them.
right.
And so it's really hard to gain trust and credibility and, have people respect you on the job side. And, I came from the trades. I grew up as an electrician, bags on. And so I know how it was for me too, like trying to earn respect. It's tough. It's tough in blue collar. So what made you at such a young age be like, I think I'm ready to take on the venture of doing my own thing?
I think it has a lot to do with luck, but at the same time, being in the right space at the right time. I was desperate for a job. I really needed a job in my early 20s, and I came across this job as a fabricator for countertops. And when you think about a marble slab or exotic stones, you automatically think luxury, right? And that's something that really grabbed my attention. And I said, okay, I really like this. And I started out as a fabricator, as a polisher. Then I moved up to an installer. And in my previous job, before owning my own business, I quickly found out that there was going to be a dead end somewhere. And so I actually asked my previous boss. I said, "Hey, why don't we showcase our work on social media?" And I
Mm-hmm.
remember her saying, "No, I think I want to focus more on house." You remember house?
Yeah, house. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I said, well, house is great and all, but I think we should really showcase our work on social media. And she turned it down quickly. And that's when I really realized, okay, I can probably do things better. I could probably go out and venture, and it's not rocket science, but at the end of the day, you are delivering a product. Again, you are a manufacturer. You are dealing with people's money and people's expectations. Going back to being a young business owner, I took a leap of faith, and honestly, it's worked out for me. It has been a struggle. I can't say you're climbing uphill.
Mm-hmm.
When you're young, like you said, you have middle-aged men looking down at you, thinking, "What is this kid bringing to the table that I already don't know?" And also being the youngest person in a room, it can be frightening. You can sit there and especially when you're a business owner, even your employees can look at you and say, they take you for granted or they don't take you seriously. It's a double-edged sword. Being young has humbled me, but it also has given me hunger, and it's made me adaptable. People didn't always take me seriously at first, especially in a technical hands-on industry like countertop industry. Um, but going back to being hungry, that also forced me to be sharper, more prepared, more consistent, more accountable. I learned quickly that respect comes from results, and
Mm-hmm.
as social, going back to social media too, that really helps showcase your work. But if you're gonna walk the walk, you have to talk the talk as well, or talk the talk and walk the walk. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. When you mentioned the respect comes from like performance, right, and delivery and meeting expectations. And as you look early in your career, it's one thing to understand the craft, right? You understand, as you mentioned, you've worked from polishing and fabrication, template, and install, and so you kind of learn the channels there. But now running your business a little bit different. You mentioned the employee side. Well, even I'm sure for you the same thing. Even though you may be looking at this to your boss, and I think there's other strategies for marketing and social media we can do. I think a lot of us, at least when I didn't understand job costing and what it costs for employees and overhead and health insurance and all the things that come with it. And so as you get into that, an employee may look on paper and be like, Mauricio, you're only paying me, X dollars an hour, but he's costing you Y or she's costing you Y. So as you get into the business side, where do you, where do you feel the best growth came, knowledge, mentorship to get you to understand, how to price a job, how to be profitable, how to meet payroll, to make sure that you're running your business as you should to stay in business and protect you and your customers?
Well, at first, as you know, I wasn't charging that much. I wanted to more than anything create
Yeah.
a name for myself. I remember when Brandon Holtzman introduced us. He said, "Hey, your Brad Leavitt wants to meet with you." And I remember saying, "Who's Brad Leavitt?" He's like, "Brad Leavitt, AFT Construction." And that's when something clicked in my mind. I said, "Okay, I really want to harness this opportunity, and I don't want to take it for granted." There's a granite pun in there somewhere.
Take
um,
it for granted. Yeah.
but seriously, as far as costs and everything, we live in a very volatile environment, especially with tariffs. I just heard that there's going to be an 80% tariff on quartzite slabs because most of them come from Brazil.
Hmm.
So you really have to take that into consideration and have a clear view of how much you're going to be charging, especially with big builds that, like I said, we countertop guys are towards the end of the build process. And so having a project that is being sent to you in a bid package, you have to account for that. You have to say, okay, this project, if we do win the bid, it's going to start within a year, maybe even 2 years, right?
Hmm.
And you have to take that into account and say, okay, I have to charge X amount in order to get Y amount, like you said. And also, taking care of your guys is pivotal. It's very important to take care of your guys. Even though I'm young, I learned that very quickly. Hey, you have to take care of your guys. You have to pay them well. You have to, because at the end of the day, they are not the business owners. They have to come back to their families and provide. And they've many of them have kids. They've got college expenses and whatnot. They want to take their families out on a good vacation, and it's very fulfilling to know that they are accomplishing their goals by doing what they love and also being paid handsomely by you. It's that to me. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to say, hey, my guys are coming up and they're earning money because of the work that they do for me.
I love that because you use the word fulfilling. And I think what's interesting, where I found the most successful business owners, Mauricio, is, if it's the pursuit of money, there's a lot, in a lot of ways, you're never going to be happy. You're never going
Mm-hmm.
to make enough. You're going to burn out a lot of people that work for you because you don't value maybe what they bring to the table. But what's interesting, to your point, like your mindset, we were saying, I really want to take care of my people. Like it fulfills me to see them fulfill their goals and go home and support their family. I've always admired those leaders and business owners because they just have a different view of business. And the funny thing is those are the people that typically, because entrepreneurship's, it's a lonely hill. It's construction's tough, like there's days I'm sure you have your low points where, it's just, you feel beat up, a project
Yeah.
goes wrong, maybe you have to replace a lot of countertops, you're eating a lot of expenses, there's things that just happen with any business. But at the end of the day, like there's just true happiness when you see that, and it pivots you to be more successful and have
Mm-hmm.
people that really want to fight for you, Mauricio, because they believe in you and they believe in you as a leader and a person. And I think it's an incredibly admirable leadership, quality that you have.
Yeah. I mean, you took a chance on me. I remember when we first met, we had lunch and you interviewed me so quickly. You said, okay, let's do it. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this guy's taking a chance on me and I have to deliver. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity, like I said, and I wanted to harness it. I wanted to give you the best deal possible in order for you to be happy with me, not only in an economical way, but
Mhm.
when it was all said and done, I wanted you to be happy with the end product, and I think that really made an impact. Obviously, I'm not like that with the rest of my builders because I'm at a point where, okay, I know
Mm-hmm.
what I can deliver. I know how much I'm worth. I know how much my experience is worth. Um, but yeah, man, like going back to like having the thing with me is when I look at a big job, instantly my mind starts clicking and it says, "How are you going to do this? How are you going to pull this off?" And I rely a lot on my guys. You know, going back, I go back and I show my guys, "Hey, this look what we're up against," and half of them just roll their eyes, but the other half really tell me, "Hey, you know, you got this. We got this. This is nothing new. This is our bread and butter. This is what we do every day." And having a real solid team to build on, I think is exceptional. I can't speak highly of my team. You know, they're very. I'm so proud of each and every one of them, from my fabricators to my Sawyer to even the guy that I have just cleaning the shop. You know, they do it for a reason, and we all strive for greatness. Um, and I think that's part of our success today.
Well, I think in fairness to you, Mauricio, yeah, and you mentioned this earlier. I mean, there is a little bit of luck and maybe opportunity, but behind luck is typically people that have like really worked hard to get to that point where that door opens and then they kick it down. You mentioned um, you're trying to find every single rock to turn working for clients, and then you meet Brandon, you get some other doors, but you knock them down as soon as they're open. And one thing I noticed with you is, yeah, pricing was competitive from day one, but it was the performance, right? And our relationships evolved over 9 years, where now it's no question. We know the performance you're going to give. And it's funny because a mutual friend of ours came to me a few years ago who had been using a fabricator for a long time. And he's like, "Brad, what do you think about Mauricio?" I'm like, "He's the best. He really is." And I remember he called you and he's like, "I'm never going back." Like, it's Brady. And he's just like, he's so good. Like Mauricio's so good. But going back to the complication and fabrication, you mentioned that it's very intricate, right? And I know you've done some projects international here. You've had some international, if I'm not mistaken, that have gone viral that I've watched and I've seen peers of mine share. And I'm like, "Hey, that's my boy Mauricio. Look at him out there." What does it take when someone wants to do something very intricate? Maybe they're doing LED. I know for me, you've done a lot of vanities where these are all built in. We're not dropping a sink or an undermount like you're fabricating everything. It's an integrated sink into the countertop. That skill set takes time to do. So how have you worked through the intricacies of LED lighting and uplighting and working with maybe Onyx product or other things that would be more favorable, where you can showcase that talent?
We rely on a lot on designers. Some of these designers know what they're doing. Some of them need to up their game, per se. We've been lucky enough to work with really great designers that know what they're doing. And honestly, we look at the blueprints and we say, "Okay, piece of cake, let's do it." Going back to the whole social media frenzy, that was such a great opportunity for us. I mean, we had a homeowner reach out and say, "Hey, I want to remodel my kitchen." This was in Paradise Valley. And it's funny because our industry is so small, right? It seems like even though Phoenix and the metropolitan area is big, but this particular homeowner reached out, and it turned out that I had done their kitchen when I worked for my previous boss. So it was funny, and I think you might know him, Rob Strother.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey,
Yeah.
oh yeah," he said, "Hey, let's do our kitchen. I want to light up my island," and I said, "Okay, let's do it." And lo and behold, it was crazy because backlighting onyx or cristallo or any translucent stone, the way to do it back in the day was with the plexiglass panels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that technology has evolved into LED sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And we found a great electrician, Scott Price. He's the one that sourced the LED sheets, and it was mesmerizing to watch because it was something that was brand new. Obviously, we weren't the first fabricators to do this, but I think we were the first to kind of showcase it at that level. And so that video went viral. We got about 10 million views, and because of that video, and we talk about the power of social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
we were presented with a bigger opportunity to do this 20-foot island with waterfalls. Everything was integrated, LEDs, farm sync, the waterfall returns. I don't think anyone had ever done that before, lighting up even the returns,
Mm-hmm.
right? We posted that video. It went super viral. I mean, I think it's up to like 40 million views right now.
That's crazy.
It's
Yeah.
insane. And we got so much exposure from that. And I have to be honest, we weren't ready because I, I, I remember getting calls from Paris, from Australia, from, the UK, Canada. Obviously, you have to be realistic and set expectations. Hey, maybe I can't do the job in Ireland, but I can definitely do a job that's in LA or Vegas or, somewhere that's a little bit closer. We posted that video, and then lo and behold, we get another call from a designer that's based out of Texas, whose client lives in the Virgin Islands.
Mm-hmm.
And I pay no attention to it. I'm like, I'm way too busy here at home. We've got your projects going on, we've got other projects going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of just didn't even pay attention, right? And then the electrician calls me, Scott, and he's like, hey, man, do you want to do a job in St. Croix? And I said, where's St. Croix? I had never heard of it. I've heard of St. Thomas, St. John,
Yeah.
whatever, but St. Croix was just a different world to me. He's like, it's in the Virgin Islands. And I go, oh my gosh, that's crazy. The romantic in me obviously said yes,
Mm-hmm.
but the realist in me, it's like, what are you doing? Like, there's no way you can pull this off.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to the designer and then eventually to the homeowner, and they were very persistent. They said, my first question to them was, why us? Don't you have someone closer to you, whether it's local on that island or in Miami, somewhere
Mm-hmm.
that's closer? And they said, look, I'll be honest with you. Yeah, we have gotten quotes, but we want to go with you because of how well that video was built. And not only that, they had recommendations here locally. So, word of mouth got around saying, these guys are good, and they can deliver. So finally, I present them a bid, an estimate, and I overpriced it. I said, there's no way they're going to go for it. And then the next day, the homeowner reached out and said, okay, man, let's do it. Here's your deposit. And I had never even met them in person. They shipped they sent their check, and I got it. And now I'm in possession of, hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy the slabs, to carry on with the shipping, logistics, buying the A-frames, getting a container, shipping it to Miami, and then from Miami to St. Croix. It was insane. But, it was a very fulfilling experience that I learned a lot from. I learned, my limitations from that experience. I said, hey, Mauricio, you can really do this. If you really set your mind to accomplish this or accomplish any big scale project, you can do it, especially if you're relying on your fabricators that have so much experience and they're really good at what we do. We can really do this.
That's incredible. As you think about the logistics, you mentioned A-frame. I mean, were there trips where you went and templated in person and then you fabricate everything here and ship it there? What did it look like for you to get from, Arizona to St. Croix?
So they don't have any direct flights here from Arizona.
Right.
You always have to get a connecting
Miami,
flight, and we
Dallas, or somewhere.
exactly, yeah. So we got one in Miami. We get to St. Croix, and it's incredible because even though it's the United States, it does not feel like the United States. People are still driving on the left lane, because I guess it used to be a
Like a
colony,
British
French,
colony.
French, and then I think it was from Denmark.
Okay, yeah.
But anyway, but it doesn't feel like you're in the U.S. We went to a nicer part of St. Croix. It was gated, and we get there, and the cabinets weren't even finished, man. So I'm like, what, Mauricio? What are you getting yourself into? Like
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
Finally they finished the cabinets, and I measured, and we come back home, and like you said, the logistics, it's insane because we were in charge of buying the slabs, fabricating them, And then because you're importing something that's from inland, from mainland, the A-frames had to be pressure treated. They had to be treated against, all sorts of bugs, or because they don't want anything to affect their island, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that you learn a lot, when you're importing and exporting.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, we get the container there, and then another thing is shipping out our tools. How do you ship tools?
Right.
You're dealing with hazmat stuff. You're dealing
Not
with
bring it on the airplane. Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah.
Our tools are seam setters, and they're heavy.
Mm-hmm.
They're also very expensive. So what we did is we shipped everything in the A-frames, shipped them out, and then I had all my guys take a flight from Miami to St. Croix. We stayed there. The homeowner was gracious enough to get us an Airbnb that
Mm-hmm.
was like, a couple houses down from where he lived. So the install itself took about a week. And then we finally took 2 days off at the end to just have fun. We went to the
How fun.
beach, we
Yeah.
went snorkeling, and it was just a very fulfilling experience. And at the end of the day, at the end of that install, we all looked at each other and said, "Man, we can really do this." It was incredible, and it all goes back to the power of social media
Mm-hmm.
and the power of presence. Being a good role model, and setting the expectations to your clients, but also to your workers, saying, "Hey, man, we really have to do this. We have to do it quick. We have to do it well." These Cristallo slabs are expensive. The LEDs are expensive, so we really want to deliver to our client, and that's what we did. And honestly, it's an experience that I'll never forget. And again, we learned a lot from it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's those little things, those experience, notches there that, like, as you move forward, it gives you more confidence in other aspects and pricing and
Mhm.
logistics. And, if you could ship something to St. Croix, it's a lot easier as you're looking at other places in the US to work. As you look at your business now, Mauricio, you mentioned that you work with a lot of designers, and designers sometimes come up with incredible designs and ideas. And then you're like, okay, how do we put this together? And sometimes I would imagine there's specifying product or material that you may have like concerns with. Like, how do you address that? Whether they're calling for maybe porcelain or engineered, or maybe certain shower surrounds, if they want to put on the floor, that you're like, hey, well, this becomes a slip hazard. Porcelain can be very tricky for you. I know it takes a lot. It could be brittle. It could be you have to order more. Walk through some of the challenges and pain points you have. Not that you're opposed to working with any product, but maybe products that customers and designers and builders should be a little bit more cautious about, or at least understand what they're specifying, so that you and our fabricators, can perform, as it should.
That's a great point. I mean, like you said, some of these designers think just because they see it on Pinterest or
Yeah. Trust me, I
and
know. Yeah.
and right now, the thing is that they look at these AI images and they think that
Yes, that
either
they're real.
they're and as they pass it on to you and say, how can you make this work, right? So you have to set expectations, and you have to let them know, hey, this material is going to look like this at the end. It can be tricky, it can stain, it cannot. Like you said, porcelain at the beginning, one of the very first slabs that came out that were sintered was Decton. And Decton my rep even told me, hey, we were not ready for this product to come out to the market because we've had so many problems. But now you've got other type of porcelain slabs like neolith. We love working with neolith.
Mhm.
Even though it's porcelain and sintered stone, it cuts like butter, and the end result is amazing. But you have to really talk to your customers, your homeowners, the designers. Hey, like you said, if we put this on the floor, it can be a slip hazard. Working with your personal build, I know that I told you, hey, Brad, these slabs are beautiful, but they are going to stain, especially if you've got kids and they spill their orange juice on it and whatnot. It's funny, we just finished a big build for a different builder, and the designer spec'd out a terrazzo countertop. Now, if you think of terrazzo, what do you think? What comes to mind?
Like flooring, like in an airport or something.
Exactly, right? But the terrazzo that she picked out is actually a marble agglomerate. So it's crushed up marble that's glued together, And she had the idea that it was going to be bulletproof because the homeowner specifically said, hey, I want my kitchen countertops and all my countertops to be bulletproof because eventually we want to have kids and we want them, to spill their food and whatever, and we don't want to have to worry about it. It turns out that she spec'd out marble terrazzo versus quartz terrazzo or
Mm-hmm.
any other type of terrazzo, and she ended up being sued, and it was this whole ordeal just because the designer didn't spec out from the beginning, this is a marble slab that will etch and stain and that you
Mm-hmm.
have to be really careful with. Setting expectations is absolutely critical in our field, because even though you have a beautiful slab that you see on TikTok, that you see on Instagram, and it looks very luxurious, people don't realize, hey, it's not going to hold up well if it's in a high traffic area. You know what I mean?
What I love about that, Mauricio, is to your point. I mean, it was in a very professional way too. When I had sent you the specs for my personal house, and you're like, Brad, you have a bunch of areas, and this is like main kitchen, and some of these areas you're like, I would highly. Not only are they smaller slabs, so you look at cost, so that's one angle, but you were looking at performance, especially knowing that I have kids, and we're gonna have this is my model home. We're gonna have clients and customers and people, and host events and stuff like that. And so it's something where you're like, hey, Brad, for you, I'd recommend maybe we look at this. And so I appreciate that because, that's the feedback we need. Do you ever have, I know, again, I don't want you to have to pitch certain manufacturers against each other, but for you as a preference, not just from maybe material to work with, but in your personal house, from your day to day living, what would you put in your house? Would it be marble? Would it be, engineered? Would it be porcelain? Like, what's something that you are a big fan of between? And am I missing any? I mean, typically, we kind of know the big three, but what are we missing?
There's a huge array of different slabs, right? And I think it just boils down to your personal preference and your lifestyle. You mentioned kids, you mentioned high traffic areas. I personally have on my kitchen a porcelain island, but the perimeter is quartz. Quartz, there is a connotation of having, you think of quartz, you think of natural stone, but no, we know quartz as being engineered. It's
Mm-hmm.
engineered stone that's crushed up together, and it holds up very well in high traffic areas. They're not going to edge, they're not going to stain, and you get best of both worlds because quartz mimics marble without having to deal with marble, and it's so difficult to work with, and it's very high maintenance, right? So I would just look at my lifestyle and say, hey, do I have kids? Do I care if this countertop gets damaged or not? We're working on a project right now with you, with Loft 31,
Mm-hmm.
and they pick marble everywhere, man, and it's insane. And I'm very grateful for that. Obviously, it gives us a lot of work, but they have high expectations too, and we lay them out, and we talk to the designer and the homeowner saying, okay, let's put quartz in the kids' bathrooms because we know
Mm-hmm.
those are kind of bulletproof. But then in the nicer areas, we're going to splurge a little bit more, and then we're going to put marble, we're going to put Carrara, we're going to put Marquina, which is the top of the marbles, and it's going to look insane. We have integrated sinks. We also have in the powder bath. I don't know if you know or remember this, but we're
Mm-hmm.
doing the Cristallo with the backlit floor.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's something that's very intricate, and it's going to be insane once it's all said and done. But yeah, like you have your powder bath, right? That's your showcase. It's going to be the focal point of your house, whether it's your powder bath, your kitchen, your great room. That's where you want to have the marble, the expensive slabs, right? Because that's your showcase. But like I said, if you have kids, if you have high traffic areas, you want to stick to slabs or material that's not going to etch, it's not going to stain, it's not going to be porous, it's not going to crack. I don't necessarily prefer quartz brands. I'm not going to say, well, this one's better than the other one.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at a point where all of them are competitive. All of them have. You look at Silestone, you look at Cambria, you look at Caesar Stone. They're the top three in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you pick one or the other, they're all going to perform very well.
What about porcelain? I mean, as you look at porcelain, you mentioned you did that on your island. Pros and cons. Have you seen that product evolve over the years?
It has evolved a lot over the
And
years.
as I interrupt you, the reason I ask is I know early on you did a lot of people know the Arcadia Lights project that did a ton of traffic, and you did this 20-foot fireplace surrounding porcelain, and there was a long time you're like, Brad, this is not my favorite. Not that you want to shy away from it, but again, it goes back to expectations. You're like, look, Brad, I know where my wheelhouse is, where I perform, and right now, like, this is a tough product for me because and it wasn't just you. This is every fabricator at the time. But walk through maybe how that product looks now.
It has evolved a ton over the years. I mentioned one of the very first slab manufacturers was Decton, and they told us, "Hey, I think we jumped the gun too early, and we put this product out into the world, and it wasn't ready to be to be showcased and to be installed yet." And that was, as a fabricator, you looked at a porcelain slab and you started shaking, man, because it was just as soon as you begin cutting, it started to crack. And so that's why the prices of porcelain fabrication are so high, because instantly you know that you have to buy a special blade, you have to have your saw at perfect conditions, you have to treat it with immense respect. Otherwise, and that's the thing, cutting, fabricating, and even installing, you have to have the perfect crew for that, because otherwise, it can crack, and now you're starting from step one. Going back to your Arcadia Lights project, I remember that project being riddled with porcelain. And I remember talking to your coordinator at the time, and I said, I don't know if I can do this, or even if I want to do this. But we ended up doing that, especially that 20-foot fireplace. It turned out killer. It was 2 cm, which is, going back to slabs, you've got different thicknesses, and usually a porcelain slab is thinner, and that also drives up the type of care that you need to have with these slabs, right? Because the thinner the slab, the more prone they are to breaking. And these slabs weren't thin on their fireplace; they were 2 cm. They were super heavy, but we got it done, and it turned out amazing. Porcelain, you just have to be really careful with it.
How do you work on seams? And the reason I want to bring that up because I know over the years we've kind of updated our SOP, our operating procedures. Because in the past, it's just like everything you learn by happenstance, right? So we had a couple clients where we work through strategy, right? There's cost in countertops. You understand, Mauricio, that strategizing where your seam placement is for performance, for cost, for waste. I mean, there's so many variables that go into seam placement, especially in a high visual area, right? And I know in the past we had done a couple, and this is nothing on you, but our team and our clients like, I don't want to seam there. I would have preferred it here. And you're like, well, it changes the price, it changes slab count. There's a lot of things that
Right.
go in there. How have you communicated that now, just internally, as you're working with so many different customers, designers? Do you have them sign off on seams? Do you have that, like a cut sheet, like shop drawings, just like a window company would, just to protect yourself, a little CYA there?
Absolutely. And it's funny that you bring up seams. A lot of designers, they pick out these very extravagant slabs, and it's funny because when I present a layout to them and they tell me I do not want book match seams. You know what a book match seam is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like you have
Like
a
a
slab,
mirror. Yeah.
a mirror
A
image of it,
reflection.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But a lot of these seams, they either have weird shapes, body part shapes, they've got demon faces, and
Body
they
part
say,
shapes.
yes, yes. And it's funny, right? Because us as fabricators, that's the one thing that we are
Particular. Yeah.
very particular about. We want it to be perfect. We're saying, hey, you've got slab A and slab B, and they line up perfectly. Why don't you like it? Oh, because I see a body shape there, and you're like, oh, come on, there's no way. Um, and I get it now. I see it now, and it's very prominent now in our industry. So again, you have to present them with various different layouts, and we are working on a project now where they didn't want any book match seams, and their countertops and full backsplash and island, they are bound to have seams. So you have to tell them, hey, they're not going to line up perfectly. Are you okay with that? And they say that's 100% fine. I don't care. It boils down to every customer, how particular they are, homeowners with how they want their veins to flow, Some of these slabs are very sporadic, so it doesn't matter if you put a seam here or seam there; they'll never catch it. And there are other customers that are very particular again, and they want everything to flow one way. And
Hmm.
so we just had a customer buy 10 slabs. They went out and handpicked them themselves, and these slabs were all book matched, right? So you had five that are going one way and five that are going the other way. And they're like, we don't want any book match seams. So what do you do? Okay, you should have just bought all 10 of them that are going in one way.
Right.
And they're like, well, I guess we'll do what you think is best. And as fabricators, we look at a slab and say, this is the way to go. You don't want these. A lot of slabs also, they have fill in them, especially natural
Hmm.
stone slabs, right? And you
Yeah.
want to avoid that because it's not natural. Going back to the nature of these slabs and their inherent nature, they are going to have filled or pits and holes in them that are filled with either grout or epoxy or even crushed up stone, right? So you want to avoid any sort of inconsistency in the slabs. And at the end of the day, they are beautiful in its own nature because they are natural. And you want to tell your customer that, hey, yeah, it might not look perfectly, but at the end of the day, it's natural. There are going to be variations, but we don't want to get to that point. We want it to be perfect for them, and we do photograph our slabs. We do photograph and the seam placement and send them for approval, like you said, to cover ourselves and to cover and you guys as a builder and to present a customer with the final product before actually having the final product.
Well, especially as you're getting into this really high end stuff. I know you touched on our Peter Rabbit project, which is going to be an extremely technical ton of
Mm-hmm.
product. There's a lot of material in that. I know because I've seen what's going into that. And I know you say it lightly. We don't do a ton of renovations and remodels at AFT, but this is a very extensive one. And I know because we're doing a renovation with the powder bath specifically, we're going to have to cut the wall so that you can even bring in these slabs through the wall. People see that. We'll get some video content, you and I,
Oh
to
yeah.
showcase that for people listening. But where I'm going is, how important when you have a client that now hand selects these 10 slabs or 5 slabs, whatever they may be, and you mentioned that some of these slabs do have imperfections. They have fill, right? You're just saying, okay, well, we could put the sink cut out here, right? Because that'll be a good place. So some clients may want a lot of veins, some might want little, and, every slab's different. 3D imaging, not just the seam placement, but how are you using technology when you're taking maybe snapshots of these slabs, laying them out to all the different cuts and scrap and everything else, how important that is for you, just again, to set that expectation up front.
It's super important. Technology has evolved a lot where now we have scanners, actual scanners that scan slabs, and they produce very high quality imaging where you can see all the imperfection of the slab. Now that can be a double-edged sword too, because you present the high resolution images to your customer and they're like, oh my gosh, I can see cracks in these things. I can see fissures. And that's, again, you have to explain to your customer, hey, this is a natural occurring phenomenon in marble slabs or travertine, whatever you want to tell them about, the imperfections of these slabs. But some of them, they don't really care. They say these slabs are beautiful. I love the way they look. I love the fill in it. I didn't even know there was fill in them. Technology has evolved so much. You can now, like I said, 3D render everything, send them, and they'll approve the slabs. Now, with quartz, obviously, that's not natural. It's kind of like a cookie cutter imaging. So we don't really photograph those because not only is it time consuming, it's going to cost more to your customer. They can go out and look at it and say, okay, we've got the perfect slab. This is what we want for vanities where there are no seams. So basically, you can cut it from any place of the slab and it's going to be okay. We just focus primarily on photographing slabs that are going to be in high traffic areas like the kitchen, that are going to be the showcase of the house, whether it's like you mentioned, master bath, powder bath, fireplaces, stuff like that. That's where we really want to photograph and have a customer sign off on where the seams will be, how the vein placing will be, to cover ourselves and to cover you guys as a GC.
It makes me think back. We did, a project up in Scottsdale, and this was supposed to be book matched, right? It's a very modern home, and you showcase what the kitchen backsplash, the island. I mean, there was like a wet bar area, and everything was fully laid out. The wine room, I mean, and it was exactly perfect, right? Because you had scanned it all. What should people know about cost, Mauricio? What I mean by that, how do different designs, whether they're integrated sinks, different edge details, how can cost increase greatly for you that maybe people don't realize as they're going into the design aspect of these countertop materials and selections?
So obviously, the more they put us to work, the more it's going to cost.
But what puts you to work, I guess? Like, what is that labor that really you look at this and it's going to be labor intensive for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, integrated sinks is one of them. You mentioned it. There is so much work that goes into those things because you want it to be perfect. Dealing with porcelain, you mentioned, you start cutting those 45s and they're going to inherently start to chip. Exactly. And again, you're diving into uncharted territory because what I mean with that is you cut a perfect 90-degree corner and you automatically voiding warranty with the manufacturer. I don't know if you knew this. You cannot, based on their specs and their warranties, you cannot do that. So these designers are calling out for integrated sinks with sharp 90s. And so you basically have to let the customer know, hey, if this cracks, just know that it's not necessarily on us and it's not on the manufacturer. It's on the designer because they're the ones calling out for this. Mm-hmm. And that's where really you have to protect yourself. Okay, if the customer is not willing to pay for that, warranty, then you just have to include it in your price. And you just have to see, okay, it's going to be a couple $1,000s for an integrated sink. And that's, they have to know why. It's because there's so much time going into it. You've got 2-3 fabricators working on it for a week straight. I don't know if you know this, but we are the ones that are responsible for hooking up the drain. So we have to be plumbers in some aspects too, even though that's not really our trade. But we have to make sure it's waterproofed and it's going to be 100% ready to go for the design, or I'm sorry, for the plumber to install it at the end of the day. So yeah, a lot of time goes into it and a lot of precision. You have to be perfect. Imagine, waiting months for your countertops to be installed. And when they're finally installed, they're not looking that good. And yeah. Who's going to be responsible for that aside from the fabricator? So again, time is money, and we have to really take our time, especially with high-end builds, to deliver and to have the perfect slabs being cut for that end product at the end of the day.
I know you've been in the business, since you were 20 roughly. Over the last, 15 years, how have you seen templating change? Maybe the skill set of templating back then to now.
Right now, the way to go is by laser templating. You go out there, you can laser pinpoint all the different corners. And again, we talked about walls not being straight, and that's one of the challenges in our trade. But with a laser templater, you can basically 3D scan an entire room. That's the way to go now. And then once you have that laser template, you can send it to CAD, and then from CAD it goes to the water jet or to the saw, right? Another way of doing it, which is the old school way, and that's the way that I learned, is by stick templating. It's very rudimentary, right? But at the end of the day, it works. It works, man. I love it. I go out, and when I do walls, like vertical installs, I prefer stick templating because it's real, and you don't have to second guess yourself. Oh my gosh, my laser's not telling me what I saw, Mm-hmm. So especially because we are, like I mentioned before, countertops are at the very end of a build, or not the very end, but we're towards the end of the build process. Yeah. We want to execute quick, right? And with stick templating, I feel like it's a quicker way. It's the old school way. And, I'm a 50-50. I'm divided by both. I can send my templater and say, hey, you're going to do this in sticks, or I can go out myself and template with a laser. Obviously, going back to showcasing the end product to your customer, you want to do everything in 3D and you want to have renderings, and laser templating is the way to go. We, as a company, we do high end builds, and we also do kind of track tone builds.
Hmm.
So the track tone builds, with cords and stuff like that, you don't really need to photograph slabs and
Hmm.
and showcase it to the customer, because whether they're spec homes or
Yeah.
they're just go go go, right?
Yeah.
Cords, flat polish. Now with high end builds, you really have to take your time, showcase a customer. And as far as templating goes, it's critical to have someone out there. And I have to be honest, I template most of my jobs. Like, even though I'm the owner and CEO, you're going to see me out there templating. And it's
Yeah.
not because I don't trust anyone. It's just I'm a very much a micromanager, man, and I know that can be a bad thing, but I don't take any risks, especially with your builds and all my high end builders out there. I go out there and template everything, and once I have my templates, I tell my guys, this is what I want, this is how I want it, and we look at the designer drawings and their expectations and say, okay, this is what they want, and we have to execute it to the best of our abilities. And it's worked for us so far, and we're grateful for having these types of technologies, but at the same time going back to the old school way.
So what keeps you up at night?
um oh gosh, that's a good question. um keeping what keeps me up at night is definitely um having success, being successful. And and I look at my kids. I've got two kids that are in 9 and 10, and then I just had a newborn. And I want them to look at me when they're older and say, I'm proud of my dad.
That's
That's
cool.
what keeps me up at night. Having some sort of a legacy that I can build. Right now that I'm in my 30s, and I mentioned to you this earlier, I look at you as a role model because you grew your company in your 30s, and now that you're in your 40s, you can kind of step back and look at what you built. That's what keeps me up at night. Building something meaningful right now that I'm in my 30s, that I'm still young, that I have a lot to learn, but I do have a lot of experience. So I want to capitalize on that and have something worthwhile at the end of the day. After everything is said and done, I want everyone in my family to say, okay, I'm proud of dad, but at the same time, being humble enough to say, okay, we did this together.
Well, I know it's harder to hear from your kids, but I'm proud of you, Mauricio. I can tell you that. I think there's a lot of peers. I've seen your growth. I mean, like I said, I was super excited to have you on because I'm like, we met, I think at Blanco's Tacos or something. I mean, this is
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
8 or 9 years ago, and here we are now. Like I look at some of our most trusted trade partners, and you are up at the top. Like you really are, Mauricio, and you've been that way. And our team loves working with you, all of them. They're like, he's incredible. Like, and all your staff and your team, and they're a great representation of you. And it's funny because one of my favorite quotes, it's the road to success is always under construction,
yeah. Mm.
right? And you think about that for us, that like at no point do you or I get to the pinnacle. And I've seen that now, like. I've been building AFT. We're coming up here in March on year 13. It'll be our 13th anniversary here in
Wow.
a couple months. And of course, there's a lot of years before that, like you, that I worked for someone else and college and worked in the trades. And so a lot of experience getting to that point. But, it's one of those things that we're always evolving, right? I look at us today and, our team, which I'm really grateful for, they're making changes every day. They're looking for implementation. We're changing contracts, language, we're changing, systems, how we're using Build-A-Trend, so many different things to like make a better experience for our trade partners, for our clients. And, it's just one of those things that, I know today we're building a better house than we did last year and 5 years
Yeah.
ago. Like your product is so good now. I know when we met, 8 or 9 years ago, Project Blow Your Mind could have been a challenge. And here you are
Oh
now,
yeah.
and you're doing these very complicated, integrated sinks and, 20-foot fireplace surrounds. And I mean, you're crushing it, but there's a process to that. And so it's been amazing, Mauricio. Like, it's really cool to watch you, and, your humility really shows in your interview today.
Well, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your team. I was listening to the episode with Burdett, and I think they nailed it on the head when they said your team carries itself with such grace. Being a sub and being a trade working for different builders, I can tell you that your team is really up there, man. I mean, every single one of them I love working with. I can go to a job site and talk to your superintendents for hours, and even though we barely know each other, there's such a thing as trust, and respect. Like you said, we can talk in a very humble way, but at the same time, we're delivering, and we rely on you guys to get work for us, and we really appreciate it. I mean, it's your relationship has been one that has really flourished and has really, helped us become the company that we are today, not only through social media, but you've given us so much exposure, and thanks to that, we've capitalized on some other relationships, and you've introduced me, like you said, with Brady and other builders, and I really want to thank you for that, and I hope that there's more years to come, and we can build way more jobs and beautiful houses down the road.
Just don't forget me when you're on the Virgin Islands, on these big in Paris and Australia doing these amazing projects.
Yeah, I mean, that's the plan.
As we close this, Mauricio, what do you do for fun?
Um, for fun, I play with my kids. I play with my older kids. We love going to the park and playing soccer, baseball, anything. We want to keep them busy. I really don't drink or party that much. I stay focused. Again, as being an owner, there's no such thing as work-life balance, and I know you've talked about this on your podcast, and it's really hard to differentiate, but I try to make time for my kids. Like I said, I have a newborn, so he's keeping us busy right now too. Building our house, we just bought a new house. So that's what we're doing for fun right now, is decorating and remodel, not remodeling because it's a brand new build, but moving in, that's fun as well.
Well, that's amazing, Mauricio. For those listening, where can they find you?
At Summit Stone AZ, that's our company page on Instagram, and that's it. We don't have a TikTok or anything. I try to stay just on Instagram and showcase our work there.
Well, hopefully you start doing some dance videos on TikTok soon.
Yeah, right. Have my guys dancing and singing. No thanks.
You already go viral with your product. Maybe you go viral dancing. So
yeah, there you go.
Well, Mauricio, appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.